Hello, so today I'll be explaining neural circuitry and behavior. It's a very interesting topic and it helps us understand how our brain works. And our brain is one of the most complex systems in the human body, and it's even more complex than a computer system. So, what are neurons? So, these neurons, they are the basic units of the brain. They are what constitutes the brain and helps the brain to understand stuff and cognitize stuff. So, the human brain, it contains a huge number of cells, and there are 1011 neurons that can be classified into at least 1000 different types. So, I'm sorry, this is 10 raised to 11 neurons. So that's a very huge number of neurons. And so nerve cells with similar properties can produce different actions because of the way they're interconnected. So as you can see in this diagram here, this is cell body or the soma. It's also called soma. And this is where all the divisions of the neuron is consisted of. And this is the nucleus of the neuron, as you know what a nucleus is. And these are the basal dendrites. So dendrites are what connects one neuron with another neuron. So there are apical dendrites at the top and there are basal dendrites at the bottom. And then there are some structures called axons. So axons are the structures where the impulses or the electrical charges that helps us to understand and cognitize various actions are present. So this is where the electrical impulses passes through and the nodes of Ranvier are interconnections between two axons. So what that does, it speeds up the electrical impulse. So instead of going slow, it moves more faster after it passes a node of Ranvier. Then there's a myelin sheath, which is basically an insulation as it is an electric charge. And you know there needs to be an insulation or we would be a highly conductive or highly electrical emulsive organisms. So just to prevent that, we have insulation. It's called the myelin sheath. And here we have the presynaptic terminal. So here we have the presynaptic terminal which connects this neuron with the next one. So these are the dendrites which connect with the presynaptic terminal as I told you, and this whole part is the synapse. So this is the basic structure of a neuron. Now there are different types of neurons. So based on the number of structures, neurons are of three types. Unipolar neurons. So they give rise to many branches like this. So they have dendrites here. These dendrites are connected to different various other neurons. And so one branch has a axon and other is a receiving structure. So these are the receiving structures and these are the axons. Then bipolar neurons. So bipolar neurons, they have oval soma. As I told you, cell body is also called as soma. So they have an oval structured soma that has dendritic structures. And pseudo unipolar cells is a different kind of unipolar cells, which is different from this as it has projections of soma or cell body, unlike this, from which others erupt from the cell body. The cell body is projected from the remaining part of the neuron. And there are three types of multipolar neurons. So multipolar neurons, as the name says, it is a nervous system of vertebrates, and axons vary based on dendrites. So these dendrites is the Purkinje cell of the cerebellum, and these have these many of dendrites, which is and it has about 10 raised to power 11 number of neurons like this, and therefore that gives about a million connections. So it has a million connection, and this is a very dense part. And this also has a lot, but not as much as compared to this. This is called this is the apical dendrite, and this is the basal dendrite. And here with the axon, which is not much magnified. Yeah. So here, this is a very common type of neuron, which is a motor neuron of the spinal cord. And so this is a very normal neuron like this one. Now, how do neurons transmit impulses? So, here I have taken the example of a knee jerk reflex, which happens to be the fundamental of learning of neural structure and neural transmission. So, if I strike your knee or precisely the patella tendon, so this is the patella tendon right here, this part here, this blue color tendon is the patella tendon and the loose connective tissue. So this is consisted of loose connective tissue. They face disturbances and they have certain ion channels. So there are certain structures called ion channels, which I'll show you in the next slide. So there's a certain structure called ion channels which open, and there's a concentration gradient between the sodium and potassium ion. So sodium and potassium ion have a gradient between the plasma membrane of the cell. So outside there's higher concentration of sodium outside and lower concentration of sodium inside, and higher concentration of potassium inside and lower concentration of potassium outside. So this gradient is what results when the ion channel opens. This gradient changes, shifts, and this whole structure moves forward. The structure doesn't move forward, but indeed the ions move forward. So neurons stay in place while the ions move forward. So this is how electrical transmission takes place, and there is another transmission called chemical transmission, which is conducted through synapses. So there are particular organic substances called neurotransmitters which are present in the synapses, and these transmitters are released out based on certain impulses given by the electrical impulse. So the electrical impulse is called active potential. So active potential, when the electrical impulses are moving, it's called active potential, and when they're resting, it's called resting potential. So when active potential may or may not stimulate transmitter release, and if it stimulates transmitter release, these transmitters are how these neurons interconnect and communicate with each other. So these synapses release neurotransmitters which moves to the next neuron. So this is the input, this model neuron, it gives the input to this neuron. And this is the integrative part where the neuron, there's a difference, there's a gradient, and then this is the conductive part where it is transferred, and this is where the output is. So when I strike you here, there is a disturbance in the loose connective tissue, and the ion channels open, and there is a concentration gradient between sodium ion and potassium ion. So this stimulates the motion of signal, and it passes to the spinal cord and reaches the brain, which interprets the signal, which it is based on the location from which the signal has been transferred rather than the signal itself, and it sends back a command to the smooth muscle cells to immediately retract. Now we have a quick overview. Before that, let me show you what ion channels are. So this is the structure of an ion channel which is open right here, and there is a gradient of potassium ion and sodium ion, and this is the plasma membrane right here, and this is the cytoplasmic side that is inside the cell, and this is the extracellular side or outside the cell. And so this is a detailed structure. This is the plasma membrane or the fluid mosaic model, and this is the ion, this is the sodium ion right here. And so this is a part of the plasma membrane. So this is where sodium binds, and sodium can move inside, and potassium gradient can move outside. So these ion channels open up and close. So what we must appreciate is the ability of our body to recognize the signal and transmit it as soon as we receive it. So whatever we think, whatever you felt like clicking this thumbnail, so that is processed by your brain. So you must appreciate the ability of how fast your brain does all this. So it happens all in a fraction of a second. All of this detailed processes, it happens in a fraction of a second, and this is what we must